All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Birds on the Farm. Today we've got a special guest, Cooper Hjerpe. Really excited to talk to him. He's one of the most exciting young arms in the Cardinals system. Cooper was selected in the first round of the 2022 MLB draft out of Oregon State, where he was a standout pitcher and earned consensus All-American honors his junior year. Known for his deceptive delivery and ability to not only miss bats but limit damage, he possesses the traits to be a true difference maker at the next level. As he continues to develop in the Cardinals system, we're thrilled to hear more about his journey, his experiences so far, and his goals for the future. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. This is awesome.
Cooper, appreciate you taking the time out of your day to chat with us. Let's take it back to your early days playing baseball. What first drew you to the game? I know your dad played college baseball at Cal Poly. Did he have a big influence on you getting into the game? And when did you ultimately realize it was something you wanted to make a career out of?
Yeah, obviously a lot of people say it, but like ever since I can remember, I had a ball or bat in my hand, and we have a bunch of photos when I'm like 2 years old, like holding wiffle ball bats and wiffle balls and all that stuff. So he was a huge driver in the aspect of baseball itself. And he's definitely my biggest role model when it comes to the sport too, and in life, obviously. But like anything I needed, he was there for me. Took me to camps, pitching lessons, all that stuff. Like built a batting cage for me. Went to Costco and got a few things and built a batting cage there on our property. So it was like a real blessing to have him in my life, obviously, and to lead me down the path I'm at today. So yeah, so he was a big driver in that fact. And then getting into like when I realized I could go far in baseball, I really didn't see it as like a true competitive game until like my junior year of high school. That's where I really realized, like when I went to like camps for Oregon State and stuff, that's when I was like, okay, like I have some pretty good stuff. Like I'm making people miss at the plate, but obviously wasn't hitting too well. But yeah, no, the pitching was really good. And then in high school, I was like, okay, maybe we should start taking the camp somewhere, going somewhere to get recruited or noticed. And my dad was, again, a huge factor and had me go to Oregon State, really recommended it. So we went up to a camp there in the fall of end of my junior in high school. And then went to a camp there. That's where I met all the coaches and stuff, had a really good showing. And then they offered me. And at that point, believe it or not, I really didn't know much about Oregon State in general as a college, which is kind of bad. But obviously did some research that next day. And I was like, okay, this is a no-brainer. Like I'm going here. And then the rest was history. So.
Who did you grow up rooting for when you were a kid? And were there any players you particularly admired or tried to model your game after?
Yeah, so I was my whole family were huge A's fans, just because we were in the Northern California Bay Area. It was close. Hated the Giants, loved the A's. Always went to O.co, that Coliseum, loved it. Favorite players, I named my dog after Coco Crisp. So got my dog Coco. Him, and then I always loved the closer Grant Balfour, however you pronounce it. Pretty bad last name for a pitcher, but he was really fun to watch. Who else? Josh Donaldson as well. I remember seeing him in like the pen as a bullpen catcher, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" And the next thing you know, he's taken off. So, Sonny Gray was a huge one when he was on the A's, believe it or not. So it's pretty cool to come to terms with that. I'm now on the same team technically as him, which is pretty cool. So, all of those guys were huge people I like to watch.
Have you been able to pick Sonny Gray's brain at all? And if so, what was the best piece of advice he's given you?
He's a pretty obviously a competitive guy and goes about his business in a very stern way. So last spring training, I didn't really want to get in his way, but you can obviously see and take a lot from being on the sidelines and watching his bullpens and how cerebral he is with those and how connected to himself he is and how he wants to execute certain pitches and why. So just from like one bullpen, you can really get a lot from him, and then being in the locker room with him as well. And just how he goes about like his prep routine and all that stuff. So it was really cool last year to see that.
That you look back on where you knew you'd ultimately have the potential to pitch for a major league team?
Can you say that again? Sorry, I kind of broke up a little bit.
Yeah, no, you're good. Was there a moment in your life that you look back on where you knew you'd ultimately have the potential to pitch for a major league club?
I wouldn't say one in general. I think it was just the consistency of how I played my junior year in college. I think all of those as a collective really gave me the confidence to realize like, wow, you can actually like, you can be pretty good. And so based off of that, it like I said, it gave me the confidence. Like there was a few within that time in college, my junior year, where I was like, holy cow, like I don't even remember the Stanford game where I had like 17 strikeouts in 8 innings like that. I mean, I was just in the zone that day, and I don't even remember. I couldn't tell you one at bat that I remember. So there's just stuff like that throughout the season that were like telltale factors of like how far I could go and how good I was.
I'm sure you've gotten this question a lot, but your sidearm delivery is a huge part of who you are as a pitcher and how you've been able to find so much success on the mound. Have you always thrown that way? And when did you first realize how unique and special it was?
I've gotten this question a lot, yeah. So as far as I can remember, it's felt natural to me. And I was just talking about it the other day with my roommate, Fennings, who's living here with me as well. It feels like I'm thrown over the top, and obviously I'm not. Like if you asked me how I was thrown, I said I would probably. It seems like I'm throwing like Trevor Bauer or something like those kind of mechanics, but it's not. And I mean, you can probably ask a lot of people that, like, how do you think you throw? And it's probably not even close. But as far as I can remember, it's felt like that. Like it's been that kind of natural thing for me. And yeah, no, it's been pretty helpful and useful. And obviously, like trying to like I haven't changed anything or anything like that. It's just been that way my whole career.
That's awesome. So getting into college, you had a really successful run with Oregon State. Was college baseball always the game plan for you? Or did you ever consider maybe trying to enter the draft as a high schooler? And then getting to Oregon State, what were some of your favorite memories once you already got there?
Yeah, so I think me and my family kind of came to terms with I was like 150 pounds soaking wet my senior year of high school. So I was like I was kind of set on the fact of going to college and getting some education and obviously developing myself physically as well as mentally. So um, throughout like high school, I knew I was going to college. And then once I got to Oregon State, like that's where it just kind of took off. And credit to them, like their strength coach, development, Rich Dorman, pitching coach, like definitely helped me develop into who I am today as a man and also physically. And they really had me hone in on the key like pillars of what baseball and life are in general. And so the 4 pillars like we went through were like be selfless, have fun, stick to the process, and then one other fourth one that I can't remember. And be selfless. Sorry, probably the biggest one. But they always call me and check in, and they asked me that the other day, and I forgot, and they weren't too happy. So, got to write those down or something. But yeah, no, it's just stuff like that where you kind of don't want to take it for granted and kind of hone in on those things.
Yeah, I mean, you stepped into a super competitive environment. Oregon State won the College World Series, I believe, 2 years before you got there. So did stepping into something like that with high-level players, high-level coaching, how did that prepare you for the major league level, or did it?
Yeah, I mean, after doing that research, like I said, junior high school, it's like, holy smokes, like, okay, this is the real deal pretty much. And so just asking questions and getting there the first day, it was pretty intimidating. And you learn to be truly like gritty when it comes to like Pac-12 and being in the Power Five and stuff. And so yeah, it was tough. Like it was a huge culture shock for me coming from a high school that, wasn't too competitive. It was just fun at that point. And then getting to Oregon State where it's like, okay, it's a national championship or bust. So it's like, you got to kind of learn your way around it and get comfortable with being uncomfortable basically. And they would go through all that stuff in like fall meetings and stuff. And so it was really good. I think, I mean, like I said on one of my posts one day, like on my last starts, it was best decision of my life was to go to Oregon State and truly figure out who I was as a person and as a baseball player.
That's awesome. So we're going to take a quick break here just for a couple of ad reads. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, 314 Sports Cards, located at 9640 Olive Boulevard in Olivet, Missouri. They're open 10 to 5 Monday through Friday and 9 to 4 on Saturday. And they buy and sell all sorts of trading cards, sports cards, even Pokemon cards, if that's what you're looking for. They have the newest selection of packs, boxes, and single cards of both local players and stars from around the league. So very soon you could be getting your first Cooper Hjerpe card from 314. So check that out. There it is right there. We're also proud to be partnering with Underdog Sports, our favorite place to play fantasy games. You got to check out their Pick'em feature. It's so easy to play. You just pick 8 stats of your favorite players. You choose whether they'll go higher or lower. You can multiply your money by 20 going 5 for 5. Does that sound like fun? Sign up with promo code CARDS to claim your first free pick and first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. We can't wait to see your entries. Seriously, it's super fun, super easy to play. So how has your arsenal developed throughout your baseball career, from your high school days at Woodland High School in California to your time at Oregon State, and now as a pitcher in the Cardinals organization?
Yeah, so it's developed a lot, to be honest, from high school. So then, I mean, in high school, like I said, it wasn't a very highly competitive division. And so all I really had was like a fastball that was straighter and a two seam that basically did the same thing. And so it was basically those two. I had a change up there, but I never threw it. So college was like the real change in the arsenal. And what I needed to do is like obviously develop off speed, at least 2 pitches, like at least a fastball and some kind of off speed. And so with Rich Dorman, the pitching coach who's there now, he really helped with my changeup and kind of certain cues for that as well. And getting that more consistent than what it was in high school, which was basically nothing. And then obviously working with a breaking ball as well, which was a curveball at that point, which I no longer have, obviously. And so basically where I really learned the most about my arsenal as a whole was at Driveline my junior year, or going in my junior year. And so me and a few other guys went up there for a couple weeks in the fall or summer, sorry, end of summer, and we did some pitch design stuff. And then, so that's where I really got like the full Edgertronic, like high speed cameras, force plates, biomechanics, like motion captures, all that stuff was at Driveline. And that's where I really realized who I was as a pitcher. And so basically, obviously canned the curveball because of where my arm slot was. It was kind of hard to get any depth on the ball. And so they were like, okay, how about we try sweeper, because it's just, it fits your plane better, obviously. And that's where I learned my sweeper, which is my bread and butter right now. It's feeling really consistent. And then obviously started tinkering with the cutter as well. And so it's starting to, that took a little bit, because I feel like with the cutter, it's not a finesse pitch. It's more of a fastball, obviously like a cut fastball. It's a screw you kind of pitch. So you just get it in there. And when I first started throwing it, I was trying to finesse it. I was trying to make it spin more, make it nastier than it should be, and all this stuff. And I remember Jason Isringhausen, one of the coaches right now for minor league ball, and obviously one of the Cardinal legends, was watching one of my bullpens one day, and I won't say it as explicit as he did, but it's an FU pitch. And so after I got that in my head, it was honestly kind of just like night and day. And so throughout that course of time, it was really within my junior year of college to now where it really developed into what it is, obviously. And so Driveline, Oregon State, and then Izzy with the cutter Nuggets. So
that's awesome. I know you mentioned your sweeper. Obviously, it's a pitch we're really excited to see you throw at the big league level. Have you always called it a sweeper? I know people have been throwing them forever, but that's like a newer term for a lot of fans. And I remember when MLB at Bat started tracking sweepers and calling them that, a lot of people were freaking out. But obviously, it's been around for a while. Is that something you call it, or did you start calling it that recently?
Yeah, it's been pretty recently. I still call it a slider. It's just whatever term we're using in that conversation. Like if you say slider, I know what you're talking about. So it's pretty similar to slider, sweeper, you know.
Yeah, so as you just talked about in pro ball, I think that your cutter has taken a really step forward. Recently, we've seen a bunch of pitchers in the Cardinals organization, especially guys like yourself with more east-west kind of profiles, whether it be Matt Swanson, Eshawn Henderson, add gyro cutters to their arsenals. From your perspective, as someone who primarily has an east-west profile, how has developing a gyro pitch with your cutter impacted your game?
Yeah, I think obviously the main thing with pitching and hitting is disrupting the hitter's timing. And I feel like obviously the more pitches you have, the more they have to respect each one. But obviously, so on like a grid, your fastballs is like a quadrant. You want your fastball here, slider here, change up here. And I also wanted like a cutter on like that line on the vertical line, just to get it off the fastball, something as hard as the fastball or a little slower. To make it look like a fastball, but really not, and like run it into a righty's hands or something, break a bat, get a ground ball or a swing and a miss. So it's really huge when you have 3 pitches, and it's even better when you have 4. especially if you can make those as consistent as possible. And so it's been a really big factor in my offseason this year is dialing in that cutter and something to get the hitters off the fastball and just make sure it's not going arm side. So,
Could you see yourself adding an additional pitch at some point?
Not really anymore. I feel like the cutter was kind of like the main one that I needed to add, just because my sweeper and changeup are significantly slower than the fastball, and so with the cutter, just a little bit off the fastball was something that I feel like I needed, something else that wasn't going arm side and not just the sweeper. So.
Yeah. As you've switched from college to professional baseball, what's been the biggest adjustment for you? Is it something to do with baseball, like competition level, or changing yourself as a player, or just getting used to the lifestyle?
Yeah, it's definitely the biggest thing is how much more of a grind it is for sure. Like you're playing every day. We're in college, you're playing every weekend and a couple midweeks. But in pro ball, it's 142 games with 6-game series, and you get Monday off. So that was definitely the biggest learning curve for sure. And I'd say once I got to AA, that's where the competition was a lot better, honestly, with how they want to like approach the plate and what they wanted to do every single at bat, and certain pitches you'd throw, they would take, and you'd kind of question like, wow, like how do you take that? Especially in my first outing. And so that was a huge learning curve, and really understanding that I needed to dive deep into like scouting reports and stuff and really take notes on that kind of thing as well to see what hitters' tendencies are. But obviously you can go down a rabbit hole with that. And I think I did too with a couple of starts, and you just want to focus on what your strengths are and not focus on their weaknesses as much. Obviously you want your strengths to trump their strengths and weaknesses. And so obviously understanding what their weaknesses are was a huge thing, but trusting your stuff and being confident what your strengths are was huge as well.
Yeah, 6-game series seem kind of strange with the traditional 5-man rotation. Have you ever had to face the same team twice in one series? And what's it like that second time?
Yeah, I have. I don't know if I did in Springfield, but I definitely did in Peoria. I don't know if it was last year. I have done it before, and it's pretty tough just because usually in a weekend series in college, it's like you face them once and you probably might not face them ever again. Whereas some of these guys you're facing twice in a week and 4 times in a season, you know what I mean? So like I swear we played the Arkansas Travelers a bunch of times. Like it was just like nonstop because you're playing the same teams.
Yeah.
So that's where you kind of got to learn like the hitters' tendencies, and you kind of pick up on it as well when you play them that much. But yeah, definitely the scouting reports was a huge one as well, and learning from those.
With the differences in your pitch movement using the minor league baseball, have you changed how you approach using those pitches? Like, for instance, with your fastball getting less induced vertical break, are there situations where you use the pitch low in the zone to induce ground balls, or is there still an emphasis on using that pitch up in the zone where it's got a flat approach angle?
Right. That's a good question. I think just with how my arm slot is, I think as long as my vert is above 4, it'll still play up in the zone. Just with like the vertical approach angle and all those fancy words, like it still plays up in the zone. With the big league balls, like I did notice the big league balls had a little less vert on like everyone's fastball pretty much, and so I didn't really think it affected anything because it affected everyone. And so if it affects everyone, it's still, I guess, technically the same kind of feedback you're getting. But obviously, like losing 3 inches of vert is not that bad, but it's still pretty significant. And so, like I said, as long as I had like anything above 4, it'll play up in the zone. And even if it had 0, I think it would still play. So.
Yeah, so last year, your velocity was up a few ticks from what it was in 2023. Was there anything in specific you worked on that offseason that led to those gains? I know that Quinn Matthews has talked about the impact of the strength training program in the Cardinals organization. Is that something that helped you as well? Are there other things that helped you as far as gaining velocity?
Honestly, I can't pinpoint one exact thing that helped me with that. And I honestly had no idea that I averaged a higher velocity last year, which is obviously a good thing. But I did start going to a different place to train my body and throwing last year and this off season in Oregon. So one was Roke, ROKKE, in Tigard for lifting, and then those were like, I was doing lifts that I've never done before in my life, and it wasn't even that like heavy of a weight, and it was like making me sore the next day to like sit down or anything. So that could have had a huge factor. And then with Kevin Gunderson out in West Lynn, we kind of dove deep into my mechanics on noticing what changed between college and my first season in pro ball, and what could have caused injuries, I guess. But we can't, like, it was just, those were just fluke injuries from what I've seen. Like it was just, it's just been some bad luck in my opinion. Like injuries happen. It shouldn't always be mechanics. Like people get hurt. And so once we came to terms with that, we kind of noticed a few things mechanically. I was pretty crossfire with my legs, my lower half in college. And then I noticed in my first pro ball season, I was more linear to the plate. And I felt, it was just kind of like a feeling I had, like maybe I could fire my hips a little more when I had more room to rotate when I was crossfire. Whereas when I was linear, my hips were already open. And so we did some cues for that. And then I feel like that helped me a little bit maybe with velocity, but I didn't really do anything in particular to change or increase my velocity, which is just kind of surprised me. Like I said, I didn't know I increased, but I guess it's a good thing. And, I'm throwing harder in my bullpens this year than I did last year in an indoor facility at 40 degrees. So that's why I'm ready to get down to Florida and start throwing bullpens there.
That's awesome. You just mentioned the injury you had this past season, and we talked about it a bit pre-show. But for our viewers, Cooper was placed on the IL with an elbow injury in July. He didn't return during the season. What was your recovery like? How are you feeling? And then after that, were you able to have a normal throwing program this offseason, or did it interfere with anything?
Yeah, no, it obviously sucked to be in Springfield and watch games that you wish you could play in. But you got to just kind of remind yourself to be in a good headspace, and whatever it is, the Cardinals are trying to help you. They're being whatever, if it's cautious or not, like they're just trying to help you out for the long term. And so when you come to terms with that, it's kind of like a just accepting it, because you can't control it. Like whatever happened. And so just going day by day and accepting what happened and getting better with what you can do. But I felt good. Like the only time it hurt was when I threw that one game, and a few days after. And then after that, like I just didn't feel it. So it was a pretty small, minor injury, like no tears or anything, just inflammation, which it just sucked. So they had me rehab in Springfield till the end of the season. And then I had a 2-week build up there as well. And I ended up throwing bullpens at the end of the season there just to make sure they knew I was good to go for the off season. So the off season had no setbacks or anything, full off season, which I didn't have last year. I had the fall league. And so it was good to have like a full on ramp off season. So we're ready to go.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. One quick thing, what's rehabbing like with a professional club? How's it different from, getting hurt and rehabbing in college?
Honestly, like I was pretty thankful I didn't have any big injuries in college. So that's why it's been kind of weird to have injuries now. Like I'm just not used to it. And so, I mean, in pro ball, like they do a really good job of making sure you're good, like checking in on you, doing whatever you need. You just got to communicate. So.
Yeah, Cooper, the Cardinals organization has a ton of talent at the catcher position, not just at the major league level with guys like Ivan Herrera, Pedro Pajes, but in the minor league level too, with guys like Leo Bernal and Jimmy Crooks. Last year, you actually had the chance to pitch to both of those guys. And I just wanted to hear what stood out to you about each of those two, and what do you think makes them so special behind the plate?
Yeah, I think, so I got drafted with Jimmy and met him down in Florida the first day. So we've been pretty close ever since. Like I'm living with him in spring training this year. So we're all pretty close in that draft class. And he just knows his baseball IQ is through the roof with everything, hitting, defense, like receiving, running. Everything he does is to a T, and it's pretty cool to watch him go about his business. But the main thing I've noticed is how quickly he knew what my strengths were, even though we didn't play on the same team until pro ball. And so he just really quickly understood every pitcher's strengths, and it just took off from there. Like when you have Jimmy behind the plate, like you have the utmost confidence that he's going to call the best game he can. And he doesn't worry about if you shake or anything. He loves communicating with you and making sure you guys are both on the same page. It's like the full on. He's the truth of a battery. So love that guy. Can't wait to see him down in Florida. And then with Bernal, with how young, I didn't know he was that young. Like it kind of blew me away because that guy is a full grown man. And so he's got some pretty good talent for how young he is. And his catching too, like his receiving was pretty good, and also his pitch calling. And also learning the pitchers, which takes time, especially in pro ball when you got a bunch of guys just coming at you from high A, low A, double A. Like you move up, you got to learn everyone new, and they do it. They both do it really quick. Everyone does. So those have been the pretty big standouts between those two, and how they go about their days as a pro baller.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So while your unorthodox delivery can be a nightmare for opposing hitters, unfortunately, it's hard on umpires too. And sometimes they have trouble accurately calling your pitches. Is this something you've noticed or dealt with throughout your career, not just in the minors? And then with the AFL having the ABS, so the automated strike system in place, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that'll get to the big league someday? Could it benefit pitchers like you at some point?
Yeah, I think there's certain pitches that the ABS can help with pitchers. At least with East-West and also North-South pitchers. Like if a North-South pitcher throws a curveball at the top of the zone, it looks like it's at his like collarbone, but it's really in the strike zone. So if you drop that in there and you can command that, like it's unhittable. Especially with like an East-West guy throwing a backdoor sweeper to a righty that starts 4 feet away from him and ends on the edge of the plate, and it just nicks that zone by a little bit. It's strike 3. So there's pros and cons to it, obviously, but I like the human aspect of the game. And I feel like the more you take it away from that, the more, like the less it is baseball. And I feel like human mistakes are what makes sports. And I feel like the more you take that away, it just becomes something else. And so, I see why they want to do ABS, to have some truth and some true like wins and losses between games. But I personally like the human aspect of things there.
How do you feel about a challenge system? Maybe a middle ground there, where if you're on the mound and like, hey, that guy got it wrong, I can call him on it. But also, obviously, in some of these systems where if you're wrong, you lose your challenge. What do you think about a system like that, maybe?
I like that a lot. I do like that there's only like 1 or 2 of them you get a game. And I like that I feel like I think it was Ben Johnson, the AAA coach from Memphis, was like, he's the one calling the challenge. Like he doesn't want the players calling it or anything. Like it should be the manager, which I kind of like. And so when you give him that taste of like a challenge, but not too much, that's where I see like, okay, that makes sense, because it could be the difference between a win or a loss. So
yeah. Well, good stuff. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was super fun. Again, this is Cooper Hjerpe, one of the top-ranked prospects in the Cardinals system. We've talked about him a lot on this show, and we do anticipate him having a big year. We've mentioned that he could potentially factor in at the big league level at some point in the very near future. So again, super excited to talk to you. Thank you so much, and we wish you the very best in 2025.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you guys having me on.